Om Shri Sathguru Namaha. In the morning we had considered Krishna for children. Krishna's divine name put together and made into one talk. And today we think about how we see Krishna's relevance, relevance of his teaching to older people also. The problems of all people, whether young or old, middle-aged or whatever, are generally the same everywhere. There's happiness, worry, sorrow, regret, and being pursued by memories. These are things which we have in our life when we are young. But because we have more time and as we get older, the pressures are less of the world is less with us, we feel these difficulties more. We see the common problem is the thoughts of what had been, what might have been, and why had these things happened. These thoughts are there to us when we are young. These regrets and worries are there. But we feel it more and more when we get older. Because we have more time to worry about these things, we have more time to think about these things. For example, the thoughts of hurts which we have endured when we are young. We see those people sometimes flourishing. We find it odd that God has allowed such people to flourish. And when we think about it, we feel bad. And we revisit and rethink over the bad things which they have done to us. And we feel anguished about it. The harsh words that are spoken to us, the wrong things that were done to us, we feel them more. The difficulties of freeing oneself from these thoughts are considerable. Sri Krishna himself speaking in Bhagavatam says, it's easier to cure yourself of wounds made by arrows made of wood and iron than the sharp shafts which people have spoken with their mouths. They speak harshly to us, and we find, and he says that they speak harshly to us and those words remain in our hearts. The abuser or the person who has done the harm, he does the harm and he goes on his way. It's a common thing which most of us would have experienced, but we don't remember the wrong things that we do. We remember the wrong things which were done to us. Very rarely we remember the wrong things that we do unless we have a very active conscience or something happens to remind us of it. So these thoughts are very difficult to bear. And we find that people have taken advantages of us in the past. We have those regrets. We see people flourishing who should not flourish. That causes also anguish. That Sri Krishna says is seen by looking at things with a proper perspective. There was some karma to be hurt, so we got hurt. But with that, we have freed ourselves from that karma. That's what Bhagavan says in Bhagavatam. We have freed ourselves from that karma. And having freed ourselves, we can move ahead. And there are hopes and ambitions which don't exist. We have hopes and ambitions that are children, the people whom we like, whom we are attached to, would follow a certain course of action. And they have their own ideas. They want to do things in another way, even though we, with our experience, know that it is wrong. They want to do things that they have, that will bring them problems, and they will not listen. They have taken courses in their lives which we have told them not to do. They have moved in paths which we want them not to do. Our hopes for them, our ambitions for them are what may torture us now. The thoughts that they could have done this, if they had done this, they would have been happy. Your thoughts for them may be right. You may be thinking the right things, but they don't think so. For these things, Sri Krishna says the only cure is two. One is Vairagya. Vairagya is having non-attachment. It's not disillusionment, non-attachment. You understand things with Vairagya. When you have Vairagya, you see things in its proper perspective. There are no illusions. In that sense, it is disillusionment. But it's not an unhappy state, it's a state of freedom. When you understand that a person, given his nature, given his ways, would act only in a certain way, you know that you could have told them better, but it is their life and they have chosen to live it that way. And we cannot do anything to change that life is to be lived that way. They have decided, their karma takes it that way, and we can't do anything about that. So the regrets that come at that time are justifiable in many ways, because it is what you feel is the true thing, it's the right thing. But it is not going to give you happiness. And it's going to take away the happiness that you have. What people don't understand is that when one comes to old age, one is freed from a lot of responsibilities. One is freed from a lot of disturbances. And the mind is able to see things better because of Vairagya. The Vairagya that is not the Smashana Vairagya. The Smashana Vairagya is when something unhappy happens, something difficult happens, you get detached from that. Then after that, you go back to that. As soon as that memory of unhappiness goes, you go back to it. That is Smashana Vairagya. When we go to a funeral, we see the body being burnt, and we say that's all there is in life. And 3 days later, we are just the same. But this is, when you're older, you see things with a broader perspective. You are able to see how wrong actions bring wrong results. There are a lot of good things in old age. But For that one must have vairagya. In order to enjoy the peace that comes with old age, one must have vairagya. And that vairagya can come only through abhyasa. Krishna says the key for everything is abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa is reapplying ourselves to spiritual truths, to ideas, moving the mind away from unhappy ideas onto happier thoughts, and slowly becoming free from them. That can come only by hard work. Controlling the mind, freeing the mind is hard work. There is no harder work. Once they went to Kabir and asked him, Kabir, why are you just simply sitting in a corner not doing anything? He said, I am not doing nothing. I am doing something which is most important. I am taking my mind off the things of the world and attaching it to the things of God. And then the mind goes back and I am reattaching it. That's the most important thing. And I am doing that. I am not doing nothing. So when we see things happening around us which we are disappointed in, we see children, grandchildren, friends, prodigies doing what we consider the wrong thing, disregarding our views. We should look at the whole situation with the perspective of vairagya. That tell yourself that this is how people will act, this is how they will react in a world that's essentially selfish, that's a world that's essentially inconsiderate. So they will think only like that. So what we should do is we should take our minds off that. For example, most people when they are in their 30s and 40s, they think about how their children will study well, how their children will do well, and then how they will get their children married, how they will live with their children. But then the children have different ideas about what they're going to study, what they're going to do. And by the time a person is 50, things are quite different from what was planned. And life becomes quite difficult to contemplate. And older, it's even more difficult because things have gone totally different from what we anticipated. At that time, reapplying ourselves to vairagya, to the truths of jnana, that's what Krishna says. When we do that, then we are freed, we are happy. When we see things in proper perspective, we see things as they are, not as we want them to be, then we are much happier because there are no contradictions, no pulls from one side and another. We are happy. We may not have much to be happy about, but there is no disturbance of unhappiness. Another thing which I have seen, most of us have felt also, is fear. Fear of unhappiness. The fear of unhappiness that comes The other thing is the fear of illness. What should I do if I am sick? If I am sick, will I be able to move about the way I do now? If I am sick, who will look after me? if I am sick, will they be able to pay my bills? Will I be incapacitated? That's something which most of us have. As we grow older, we feel. And some of us feel it when we are young because of circumstances, but as we grow older, this fear of, I should not lie sick, many people have told me that. I have also felt that. Thought that one is not able to look after oneself. Thought that one will be sick and dependent on others. It is something which is very fearful to a person as they get older. People who are single generally feel that they feel it more. But everybody does have that feeling. When you are sick, you are alone. When you are sick, you are alone. That's the time you know how alone you are. The pain you go through yourself. You go through to the hospital, you leave everybody at the door and you go inside. Whether you go to a theatre, whether we go to the room where they do the investigations, you go alone with an impersonal nurse who doesn't care. So, how does one live with that? Vishnu Mohan, the first disciple of Sri Sathguru, he once asked me, what will you do if you are paralyzed? If you have to die like that? I didn't know what I would say. He said the only thing will be the mantra. If you are used to saying the mantra now, we were then in our 20s. If you can say the mantra now, then at that time when you are sick, you will be able to take your mind off your suffering and you will be able to live with it. Because you can substitute the thought of your illness, thought of your fear with the mantra. Winston Churchill said that the best investment is putting milk into babies because we have a healthy younger generation. But the much better investment is to put the mantra into your mind. When you put the mantra into your mind, concept that God is there for us, and then when you say a mantra, you absorb yourself in it, then unhappy thoughts go away from you. Unhappy thoughts don't live with you. Our fears are very real. As we get older, the fears that we have, they are very real. Because these are things we have to live with. We may be ill, we may be alone, we may be in an old age home. And there we are just one of a number. Whether it's a hospital or an old age home, we are just one of a number. There are so many people there, we are one of them. The people working there have to look after so many people, we are just one of them. No one is going to think of us individually. Relations will come and go, but it's only like people coming to look at us, look at animals in a zoo. But when we go inside the operation theatre, when we are put inside the MRI machine, when we are lying in the ward, machines all around us, alone, we are not really alone. Krishna is there with us, but we don't know He is there. We have not brought Him into our lives, that's why. We do not see Him there. He is right there next to us. God is right there next to you. He is not on a shelf in the puja room. God is right there next to you. When you understand that, then your life is transformed, that God is right there next to you. That's why Krishna has spent 2 chapters in the Gita. For the 6th chapter he tells us how to bring our minds together, how to bring our minds, gather the thoughts of the mind and bring it together and meditate. He tells us how to use jnana, and using jnana how we can strengthen the fiber of our personalities. He tells us how when we are suffering, his thought can help us. But that is something which can help us only if we take that help. Krishna is there, but we don't see him. See, when we call him, then he sees us. When we don't call him, he is there waiting, but he can't come until we call him. So, if we are going to, when Krishna was in Dwarka, Arjuna and Duryodhana went to see him to ask him for help. Duryodhana came there, he saw the chair and he sat on the chair by the head of the bed. Arjuna, more humble, sat at his feet. When Sri Krishna awoke, he saw Krishna. He saw Arjuna. Krishna saw Arjuna. He didn't see Duryodhana. So we must similarly let Krishna look at us. We must be where he can see us. And that is not to sit in our glory and on our egos. Good morning. Ahamkara, Mudhatma, deluded by the delusion of the ego. Kartaham iti manyate. We think we are doing these things. But these things are not done by us. Circumstances help us to do what we have done. All of you all have come here today to hear this word about Krishna. So many circumstances have brought you all here, otherwise you could not have you, there could have been obstacles for you to come. But it was Krishna's will that you could come here, and so you were able to come. This morning I was giving an example of going to the office. We say we go to office, we are always in time in the office. I'm sorry for those who came in the morning, they heard it once already, but I'll say it again. But for us to go to the office on time, there are so many things which have to happen. We have to hear the alarm, we have to get up, and then there has to be water on the tap, there has to be current so that the electricity so that the pump will work and there is water on the tap. Then we have to bathe, food has to be ready on time, or if the food is not there, we must have the intelligence to rush out without eating. The vehicle has to be in time, there has to be no traffic jam. And finally the person who is supposed to open the office should be there to open it on time. Then only we can start work. So for a small thing like that, to go to work on time, how much of other things are contributing to it? And we say, I go to office on time every day. How many things have happened for that one thing to happen? So similarly, we should not sit on the throne of our ego like Duryodhana did, but to be there at Sri Krishna's feet and wait for him to see us. Then when he sees us, then His grace falls upon us. Now we can think also, there's another fear which all of us have. What will happen when I die? Will I exist after that? Some very traditional people have this fear, after I die, will the ceremonies be done for me? Will that help? Or if they don't do it for me, what will happen to me? How will I suffer there? If the ceremonies are not done, then we will have a difficulty there. Because when we go, we are going into an unknown area. So, if we are strengthened from below, things become easier. Like when a child goes to school, if there's already one or two children they know, it becomes easier to go. Similarly, the prayers which we give from below to the departed soul helps it to survive and gives it happiness. But for all this, see, when we are dying, we can die peacefully, we can die fighting death, we can die, we can go quietly, but a lot of it is not in our hands. The way we are going to die, are we going to be suffering for breath, or are we going to die in our sleep? The best thing would be to meditate at all times, so that when we go to sleep, if we are not going to get up, then we will be, our consciousness will be concentrated on God. So then we will have an easy passing. The passing is not so much as what happens on the deathbed, as what happens after. A person who is detached from the world, after they are detached from the body, they do not suffer much. While a person who is attached to the body, who considers himself to be the body, even if he has got spiritual or religious knowledge, they try to re-enter the body. They try repeatedly to re-enter the body until they see that the body has been taken away for disposal. Then they are traumatized because they are lost. They think of themselves as being the body. While if we have throughout our lives thought of ourselves as being more than the body, that the body is something which we are using temporarily, and then other bodies are there, there's another life which is there for us, and we have to attain that life and live that life as well as we live this life. For all this, there are only two things. One is Vairagya, the other is Abhyasa. So we move our minds away from that which upsets us, that which gives chanchalam in our mind. We take our mind towards that which makes us bright, helps us to think clearly. And the most important thing is to take our minds towards Sri Bhagavan's feet. He says, Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena, attached to this form of worship called Abhyasa, this course of action called Abhyasa, putting the mind back in its place, putting Chetana Nanyagamina, with our consciousness not going to anything else. Paramam Purusham Divyam, that divine supreme being. Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena Chetana Nanyagamina Paramam Purusham Divyam Yati Nanu Chinte, once we free ourselves from other thoughts, our minds are aligned totally with Him. There are only two people that matter in our lives. One is God, the other is ourselves. Now you must be thinking, why is this man coming here telling us that we matter? He should be saying about unselfishness. But are we really being unselfish? We think about what the other man thinks about me, what this person said about me. So we are giving more importance to those people than to ourselves. Instead of that, we concentrate on ourselves, clear our mind of the cobwebs of Maya, and proceed towards God. We are doing more for ourselves than we could by, saving up and ensuring ourselves. This is the best insurance. The best investment is putting the mantra in the mind, as I said earlier. So as we do that, in the beginning it is difficult. In the beginning other thoughts will come. We can't start too early. When we are young, when we are teenagers, we are able to put our minds to God, at least for some time in the day. What does Sathguru say? When you use a pen, when you use anything, after using it, if you put it back in its own place, then life becomes easier. You don't have to search for it again. There's no difficulty. Similarly with the mind, a proper place for the mind to rest is at the feet of God. So you use the mind is not us. The mind belongs to us. So you use the mind and put it back in God's feet. So this mind is not deciding what we are going to do. We decide what the mind is going to do. And after we use the mind, we have to think of various things, we have to use the mind to analyze various situations we have come to. The mind becomes, as we purify it, it becomes a reflection of God's will. So we do what we have to do with the mind, and then we put it back to God. So the mind goes back to God. The mind sees something blue, it's reminded of Krishna. But it doesn't mean that we are going to buy a blue dress. We analyze the blue dress compared to the other dresses, yes. And then we buy what we want. But we see the blue dress, remember blue is the color of Krishna. So everything should remind you of God. When everything reminds you of God, then you go naturally to Him. And our lives become easier. If this is done, this can be done at any time in our lives. Any time in our lives, whatever our age, we can do it. And whatever our age, we must do it. If we want to be happy, we must move our thoughts back to God. When we move our thoughts to God, when we realign our minds to God, then we find life is easier. Now we will find there are so many people who are unhappy, who have been good, but they are unhappy. They have got difficult situations. But if we see, they may have been good people, but they have not trained their minds. If they train their minds, they'll be happy. And if they have been good people and they are suffering, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had cancer, so did Ramana Maharshi. That is something which is regularly pointed out. But just look at it. The body is made of 5 elements. The body is susceptible to illness. So their bodies had cancer. Each body has to have some illness. It's not going to remain perfect health throughout its life. Vivekananda had diabetes. All these things we know, yes. But that doesn't mean that Vivekananda was unhappy. That those last days of his life he was very happy. He was absorbed with the thought that he is going to die. He was absorbed with the work which he had to finish before he had to die. So the manner of going doesn't matter to us. Another thing is that regrets. We could have looked after this person more. When a person dies, we feel it. When we are ill and we think we are going to die, we feel it. I have felt it. But I remember once one person was dying and his daughters were talking to me. So one daughter said, I have no regrets. I think I treated him well. The other daughter said, he was a very interfering person. He kept poking his nose into everything. When the last time I came, I told him, you just go and sit in your room, I'll see to everything here. He must have felt bad, I'm feeling bad about it now. So what I said to her was, it's no use feeling bad about the things that you did to this person. You can't make it up to him, he's dying, probably he may be dead even now as we talk. But what you could do is learn from this and not make that mistake when you deal with other people. Remember always the anguish you are feeling now, that you did something wrong and you can't correct that. And so when you deal with other people, deal with them with kindness and with understanding. There's a joke once, one man said, I spoke very badly to my father-in-law and he died the next week. I'm still feeling very bad about it. So we were all very young then. So Vishnu Mohan said, I may be also dead next week, so talk with me nicely. There's a joke he said, I may be dead next week, so talk with me nicely. So it is something which we feel afterwards, but that should affect our actions today. Whatever may have happened yesterday. See, Sathguru says, you should go into tomorrow carrying the burdens of 1,000 yesterdays. All these things which happen to us in our lives, all those worries, we shouldn't be carrying that when we are going ahead. But on the other hand, the lessons which we can learn from them, those should not be forgotten. So as we progress in life, as we progress in our life, we feel what is going to happen, why did we do this, we could have done that. On one side, that is natural. Upanishad says, until one attains Parabrahman, always this thought is there. Why didn't I do this? That was a better action, I could have done that. Everyone is tortured by that thought. But the only thing is to think that I did those wrong actions, I shall not do it again. But then the question you may ask me, I am talking about Krishna for older people. So we may not get a chance, I am now 55 or 3, I may not get a chance to repeat those actions which I did when I was 18. But by storing that in my mind, that I don't want to do this wrong action again, I create a tendency to avoid that action. And that will lay me in good stead the next birth. Because very few of us are going to get moksha in this birth. So we are going to come back again. So when we come back again, let's be prepared for the next birth. The next round comes. See, Dr. Radhakrishnan gave a very good example about the law of karma. He said, it is like when you play cards. You are given certain cards. That is your karma. But with those cards, you can play how you want. You can play well, you can play badly. That is in your hands. So with that, you decide whether you are going to win this game or whether you are going to lose this game. So similarly, we can store up this knowledge of what is right and wrong in our minds. So when we are born again, we take that knowledge only with us. When we go from here, we take Papam, Punyam and Jnana. These 3 things will we take with us. Some of us take Ajnana, but that can be decided or rather what we are carrying can be decided by us. What are we going to put in this suitcase which we are carrying in our next birth? The things which we don't like, those things can be, which are not good for us, this can be, we can take it out of the suitcase, pack the suitcase with good things and take it with us. And it's not whatever the rationalists may say that we are going into darkness, we are going into non-existence. Before we leave this body, a new body is created for us. And just like how we see a caterpillar, before it leaves this piece of grass, it gets hold of another piece of grass. All of us have seen it. It goes from one to another. So, a new body is being created for us according to our karmas. We draw that sort of body to us according to our actions, like the magnet draws, we draw it to us. And we go to such a body, we go to such circumstances which are helpful. In science class, many of us may have seen, we put a magnet, we put a paper on it, we put iron filings, and we see the force field of the magnet, how it is. When the magnet is broken, we don't see a perfect field. Similarly, we are drawing to us the circumstances in which we will be born tomorrow. And so when we are filling up our suitcase with things to carry, let us take positive things, good things, and most important, an attachment to Sri Bhagavan and his lotus feet. Sri Sathguru Arpanamastu, Sri Krishna Arpanamastu. This talk has been not only for you all, it's also been for me, because I am also growing old and these thoughts are very relevant to me also. So I thank you all for coming here and making me give this talk, which is also enlightening for me. Sri Sathguru Arpanamastu.